In the small, fog-bound town of Brindlewood, everyone knew of the lantern keeper, a solitary figure seen only when the thickest fog rolled in from the sea. He was a tall, hunched man wrapped in a threadbare cloak who drifted down the cobbled streets with a rusted lantern swaying in his hand. The lantern's glow was not like any ordinary light. It flickered blue then green, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls and made even the most fearless shiver. The lantern keeper had no name and no home, or at least none that anyone knew of. People said he wandered the streets because he was cursed, doomed to guide lost souls back to where they belonged. But no one really knew for sure. In Brindlewood, questions about the lantern keeper were whispered and no one dared to ask him directly. That is, until a girl named Isla moved to town. Isla was different. She didn't believe in curses or ghosts or fog-bound legends. She was a practical, sensible sort who was often up late, watching the fog roll in with her head full of curiosities. It wasn't long before she noticed the lantern keeper herself, drifting silently under her window on a particularly misty night. She watched him for a while, his lantern casting pools of strange-colored light, until she made up her mind to follow. Quietly, Isla slipped out of her house and padded down the damp, misty road. The lantern keeper moved at a slow, steady pace, so it wasn't hard to catch up, but she kept her distance, careful not to be seen. They passed the empty baker's shop, the old clock tower, and the abandoned inn that everyone said was haunted. Finally, the lantern keeper stopped in front of the iron gates of the cemetery on the edge of town. For a moment, Isla thought he might disappear right through the gates, leaving her behind. But instead, he turned around, lifting his lantern so that its light fell on her face. She froze, her heart racing. His eyes, shadowed and sorrowful, studied her for a moment before he spoke. "You should not have followed me, child," he said, his voice deep and quiet like the sea at night. "I'm not afraid," she replied, though her voice trembled. A faint smile touched his lips. "Then you're either very brave or very foolish." He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter the cemetery. Though her legs felt like lead, she took a shaky breath and crossed the threshold. The fog seemed thicker here, swirling around the gravestones like ghostly hands. The lantern keeper moved beside her, the light of his lantern illuminating names carved long ago, names she'd never seen before. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "To guide the lost," he replied. "There are souls who wander, seeking something they cannot find. I am here to give them light, to show them the way." They walked deeper into the cemetery, and she began to notice faint shapes flitting in the shadows, wisps of mist that seemed almost human. She gasped as one drifted closer, a woman in a pale dress with hollow eyes. But the lantern keeper held his lantern up, and the light seemed to calm her. "Where will they go?" Isla asked. "Some to peace, some to memory, and some to dreams where they will be remembered," he said softly. They continued through the mist, Isla watching in awe as the lantern keeper's gentle light guided each wandering soul to its resting place. One by one, the shadows faded, their faces softening as though relieved of a heavy burden. When they reached the edge of the cemetery once more, the fog had lifted, and the town lay quiet and still under a sky full of stars. "Will I see you again?" she asked. "Perhaps," he replied, his face disappearing back into the hood of his cloak. "If the fog is thick enough, and if you believe in the light." With that, he turned and faded into the mist as the last trace of the fog vanished. Isla returned home, her heart full of something she couldn't quite name, a strange mixture of wonder and peace. She never saw the lantern keeper again, but sometimes on the foggiest of nights, she would see a faint green and blue light in the distance and remember the night she followed a ghost into the mist.